Welcome to Dear Watchers, an omniversal comic book podcast where we do a deep dive into the multiverse.
We are traveling with you through the stories and the worlds that make up an omniverse of fictional realities we all love. And your watchers on this journey are me, Negative Guido.
And me, Rob Ottman.
Oh, cute. I thought maybe you were going to go with Elasti-Rob, but all right, that one works better.
Of course. And Guido, what's new with us in our little segment of the multiverse?
Well, we might have some new special episodes coming your way soon. We've been planning a slightly different format we can present, so stay tuned for some fun changes occasionally, not regularly. We're sticking with the same old format you've known to come to love. Otherwise, same old this week. So please just keep thinking of those people that you can tell to listen so we can keep growing in 2023.
And please consider joining us on Coffee as a patron, where our Promethea book club is growing. Shades of Promethea in one of today's issues, I have to say. And if you could take a moment to leave us a review on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts, that would be amazing. But if you are joining us for the first time, we have 3 sections of our travels today. Origins of the story, what inspired this other reality. Exploring multiversity, we dive deeper into our alternate universe. And pondering possibilities, we examine the impact and what's followed or coming in the future. And with that, dear watchers, welcome to episode 82, and let's check out what's happening in the Omniverse with today's alternate universe. And today we are asking the very unusual question, what if the Doom Patrol was recreated in name only on a tangent, whatever the heck that means?
Well, the tangent's a little play on words, our listeners will find out. This was Earth 97, though it later became known as Earth 9. It's from a full run of comics set on this Earth that this is our first trip to, and we'll give you the background on in just a moment, though this is the only Earth appearance of that Doom Patrol. So let's find out more about the Doom Patrol and this run of comics before we start our trip.
Yes, so the Doom Patrol was created in June 1963 for DC by Arnold Drake, Bruno Premiani, and Bob Haney. Drake was writing and had Haney's help in developing the characters for Premiani's art. The team was announced as the Legion of the Strange and
Which
debuted.
Is very cool.
Yeah, it's a great name, and debuted in this anthology series before being renamed into their own title and continuing until 1968.
Right,
and
the anthology My Greatest Adventure.
And controversially, Drake went after a little gentleman named Stan Lee when the Uncanny X-Men debuted just a few months later with a bunch of freaks and mutants led by a wheelchair-bound Team Smart Guy.
Yeah.
Coincidence? What do you think?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a fascinating story. I actually wish there was more out there about this. Yeah, I'll share a bit about my history with Doom Patrol when we get to that question, but I have to say it is uncanny, the similarities. And it's interesting when you read Drake, there's a point where he's really aggressive. There's a point where you can find quotes from him talking about how it just had to be intentional. There's just no way he could imagine it being a coincidence. I think there's rumors. I mean, it's so hard to find details. There's rumors of that he threatened a lawsuit and then gave up on it. And so it's a really fascinating thing. And then later in life, he does seem to soften and say, maybe he uses some metaphor like they're both in the same vineyard. And so they're going to end up with the same product at the end. So I don't know. It's a really interesting thing Doom Patrol is a few months before X-Men, so unlike some other odd coincidences that have happened over the years between the two companies, there's time here, I think, that the X-Men could have been inspired, but who knows? So it is a cool controversy, and I do wish we got more information about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff with any potential lawsuit and all that.
Yeah, I guess we'll never know. And the characters other than the Chief and Professor X are pretty different. Yes, they
Yeah, though
both
there's
live
a
in this
lot of
big.
similarities that I'll mention.
Okay.
Yeah, because there is. I was surprised by how many similarities. As a lifelong X-Men diehard, I was surprised by how much similarity there was. So.
Well, controversy or not, the Doom Patrol was relaunched in 1977 and then again in the 1980s. And finally, the most iconic runs were in the 1990s by some heavyweights, Grant Morrison, who relaunched it for Vertigo Comics, and then was succeeded by Rachel Pollack. So they tried to reboot Doom Patrol, many different volumes, some totally unrelated and out of continuity practically, until My Chemical Romance, Umbrella Academy icon Gerard Way, his line for DC's Young Animal imprint. And then that wrapped up, and then it's finally this March 2023.
That was years ago too, so it's really been out of print, which is interesting.
Yeah, so finally this March in 2023, there's going to be a new miniseries out, which is a little odd considering that there has been, of course, a television show version of the Doom Patrol that has been out for 4 seasons and counting on DC Universe and then HBO Max. And of course, we're going to touch on that TV show too.
That. We're not going to touch on it. We're going to dive right into it.
Yes.
But before we get there, so this story, what if the Doom Patrol was recreated in name only on a tangent, comes from a whole initiative at DC, I guess an initiative, a moment called Tangent Comics. And this is our first trip to the alternate universe of Tangent Comics. This is a world developed by Dan Jurgens, who led the event. It's 18 original issues in 2 waves from 1997 to 1998, all one-shots, and then one 12-issue maxi series follow-up in 2008, so 10 years later, called Tangent Superman's Reign. This is not an Elseworlds, though it is an alternate universe. It's quite fascinating. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Atom shows up and ends up destroying Florida, and all this stuff happens to create New Atlantis, and that moment happens, and from then on, the history of the world is completely altered by the presence of superheroes, though like Richard Nixon exists and all these things exist, but the world is different. So it's a little almost Watchmen-esque in that way. And Jurgens said that one of the goals of Tangent, now there's 2 goals with this project, but one is that the Earth Tangent was meant to be less like our Earth. In Dan's mind, the DCU Earth was more like our Earth, just with these superheroes in it. So it was very much meant to be our reality, but Superman is in it, Batman's in it, Wonder Woman's in it, Themyscira's in it, etc. This is supposed to be a world that has been totally transformed, different world, because the superheroes are in it. Then the other piece of this project, the Tangent Comics universe, is that these are characters in name only. So there's no backstory to the DC universe we know. There are no connections. There is no canon. There's nothing that is pulling from the world people are familiar with in DC other than the names. So in that way, it's actually a little bit like the Just Imagine Stan Lee created the DC universe that we just started covering pieces of last month. And it's interesting to me that these 2 projects existed at DC within a few years of each other. These attempts to like just give someone the chance to redo the universe in name only. So a little odd of a project, but yeah, we'll see if this was successful. All of the Tangent Comics were dedicated to Julie Schwartz, of course, classic DC Comics editor, architect, writer, who laid a lot of the groundwork for the Silver Age and beyond DC universe. And just to put a pin in Tangent Comics, which we'll certainly revisit on many future episodes, there has been barely any crossover into the DC universe, except Green Lantern, as the Tangent Green Lantern has had little bits of crossover. I think there was a desire at some point to pull her in to the DC universe. But otherwise, most of these characters and this world haven't been seen, and That's it. So Tangent Comics, our first trip to what was Earth 97 and then re-established during the Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis era as Earth 9.
So we're talking about two things that we've never covered on the podcast before, Doom Patrol and Tangent Comics. So Guido, what was your background first with Doom Patrol?
All right, so Doom Patrol, this is an interesting one because I always sort of flirted with the Grant Morrison run as a big Morrison fan, but I never sat down and read it start to finish because it's pretty impenetrable. And I had no history with the team. And I would say there's probably a large chunk of my life where I thought they were a take on X-Men. I thought that they were copying X-Men. I hadn't realized the order of things, really. The TV show comes out, we watch it, and I think it is just to die for, and we'll talk so much about it because I absolutely love it. I think it's one of the most fun, best executed comic book superhero TV shows. And that inspired me to read more Doom Patrol. And I love Rachel Pollack and started collecting those single issues whenever I could, mostly out of dollar bins. And just this year, the last few months actually, I have started to do an entire Doom Patrol start to finish read. So I started in the Silver Age, and I am now right at the tail end of Rachel Pollack's run. And I've read everything Doom Patrol there is. Sometimes I've skimmed, because sometimes they're not that good. But the Silver Age was really good. And what surprised me when I revisited it, or visited it for the first time for me, actually, was how much of the Silver Age DNA is in the show. Even though the show also is using a lot of the Morrison Pollack weirdness and absurdness and surreality and mysticism to a certain extent, everything else about the show is there in the Silver Age. The Silver Age issues are really fun, and they are remarkably like X-Men to me. Other than they're not as soapy, which X-Men doesn't become until later, but iconically, they're not as soapy, and they're not as grounded in the real world. They're a little pulpier, but otherwise, like every issue in the Silver Age Doom Patrol, they're struggling with being freaks and outcasts, and they're struggling with like the world knowing who they are and knowing that they're freaks, and can freaks also be heroes? So it's really amazing to me. And then there's the Brotherhood of Evil, which of course in the 4th issue of X-Men is the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Like there are really remarkable things where I'm like, I think they're sort of aping each other in this. Doesn't matter because they're both now extraordinary properties that are quite different, even though they share a lot of DNA. But I was surprised how much DNA Doom Patrol shared. So recent fan, but now really becoming a very big fan of this series. What about you for Doom Patrol?
I'm trying to think if I don't think I ever read any Doom Patrol comics. Where I did always see them was being a big reader of DC Who's Who and just constantly reading those. They always had such a striking look, especially Robot Man with that bronze skin. And I think even in the DC Who's Who, they're wearing uniforms that are very early X-Men-esque, which you don't really have in like the issue that we're just going to discuss today, but they're wearing kind of matching uniforms, color-coded
they have
outfits.
The red and white ones, whereas the X-Men have the blue and yellow.
Has that kind of X-Men feel. So I remember always seeing them in there, but never read them. So they were definitely always in the back of my mind. And as we've talked about on the podcast before, so much of my introduction to these characters, any of the characters we're discussing, came from Saturday morning cartoons and things like that, and certainly they were never featured there. So really, my first real introduction to them was on the TV show, which I, like you, really enjoy a lot. So that was really my main introduction.
So for
to
this
these characters.
episode was probably your first comic read of them.
Totally, yeah. I probably
fun.
Yeah.
Exciting.
I might have had them in like a dollar bin. They were probably definitely someone I might have had, and just picked up randomly growing up, because I feel like you would constantly see the Robot Man, Negative Man popping up in a dollar bin. But if I did read them, I definitely forgot them.
Yeah, I doubt it. And Tangent Comics, it's one of the few alternate universes that I never ever explored. I had 2 or 3 of the issues just because I was buying them. I was like, what is this? But I was never a big fan of the design of them, and I never fully wrapped my head around even what the Jurgens and DC were trying to do with it. So I never got into it. I never really read them. So this was my first reading, sitting down, reading and absorbing a Tangent Comics issue and understanding the world. So that's pretty new to me. I was very familiar with it, but it's new to me in terms of reading. And I'd imagine the same is true for you.
I had never even heard of it until you mentioned it to do this episode. We got to meet briefly at this last year's New York Comic Con, Dan Jurgens. So that was a lot of fun, and he was super nice.
Next time we see him, we can ask him about Tangent Comics.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we'll want to. We'll see when we get to this one.
I was just slightly too young for the whole death of Superman. I had when Superman came back. But the big thing that I read over and over again, and I have it ingrained in my brain where I even bought it, was 0 Hour that Dan Jurgens wrote. That was the comic
he's a DC Comics architect. So
yeah, I was camping. And they had a little store where you could buy comics at the campground. I don't know why. And of course, I was just sitting there in a sleeping bag, just devouring 0 Hour. And it definitely helped fuel my love of the JSA and some of those early Golden Age heroes and how they mixed in that kind of world building sense. I guess he was DC's event guy for a while, it seems.
Yeah. Well, one day we'll probably get to the Crisis in Time. But for now, let's deal with this other. Actually, this is a time crisis too, but we'll get to that.
Yes, so speaking of time, let's travel back to the 1960s for our origins of the story.
Right now, on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions. Our amazing story begins a few years ago.
Fitting that there was Stan with some X-Men connotations with these this issue. So our first issue today is the not very well named My Greatest Adventure number 80 from June 1963 DC Comics, and this is entitled The Doom Patrol.
This is written by Arnold Drake with Bob Haney, penciled and inked by Bruno Premiani, and edited by Murray Boltinoff. We read it because it is the introduction to the Doom Patrol, their first appearance, their first issue, and their origin. So, first impressions? What'd you think?
It's very much an origin story. We get, and it's definitely kind of going back to what you were saying about the TV show. Wow, you can see the TV show exactly in
That's
this
what I
first
was so surprised
issue.
by as I read these Silver Age books. Yeah, because I really, again, because the show is from the beginning also weaving in like the Mr. Nobody and the really surreal, wacky stuff. I thought it was going to be more of that, but no, it is so pulling from this Silver Age. I love this issue. I'm biased having read the run. I think if you got deeper into the run, you'd probably appreciate the Silver Age pulpiness of it. This issue on its own maybe isn't anything special, but...
Yeah, it felt a little stilted to me, but a lot of that is the 1960s style writing. And
they get a little weirder even by the second and third appearance. Like, they start to just get... This one, I mean, they keep saying that they're weird, even on the cover. I love that they're called the Legion of the World's Strangest Heroes. So they're really clearly trying to position them as being these strange freaks. But this issue... and plus Immortus gets a lot more fun. This one, he is just like some evil mustache.
You don't even really know too much about him.
Little old guy. No,
I kind of
wanted. He dies at the end, so clearly they like didn't intend to bring him back and have this whole backstory that he's literally immortal. But yeah, they do, and it's cool.
Yeah, I definitely wanted it to be a bit more weird in that way, and I think in that way, when I have read early X-Men, I mean, and as you said, maybe it sounds like Doom Patrol gets into that, but I feel like in the X-Men they're dealing a little bit more with them, and maybe because also in the X-Men they're supposed to be younger teenagers, and here they do seem like adults. So they have, even though they have these strange powers, they seem a little bit more well adjusted to their powers than say the super early X-Men are.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the tension comes in again with, are they going to be accepted by the world as freaks? And then the Negative Man here is different. You probably noticed he can only leave his Larry Trainor's body for 60 seconds. So that creates a lot of the tension in these early books. Like it's like, is he going to get back in time?
Yes,
they even
but...
do like these countdowns, which is kind of fun. There's actually a whole issue in the Silver Age where like each page has a little timer and you're like watching it unfold to see if he'll get back into his body.
But the suspense isn't really there because of course they're not going to be killing the character. And it reminded me a lot
there's
of
no stakes, but
what they did with Thor early on where Thor will turn back into a human if he doesn't have Mjolnir in his hands after a little bit. So they're constantly, I feel like in those early Thor comics that we've read, oh my gosh, is he going to get back in time? Because otherwise he's going to transform and people will know his identity. And of course, like it always reaches there. And so maybe the comics of the 60s were definitely obsessed with, oh, let's add on this like bit of tension. But especially to a modern reader, it doesn't feel tense. It kind of starts to feel a little tedious, actually.
Well, I think what it does too is it creates a limit at a time when so much of this storytelling was new. They, I think, didn't want total omnipotence, and they didn't know how to deal with total omnipotence, which of course storytellers and creators have become much more adept at handling, like how not to have someone like Thor just feel omnipotent all the time. Like, why can't he just do anything? So I think that's probably the case here. Like, instead of, because ultimately Negative Man, if he could stay out of Larry's body, would probably succeed at every mission that they have in these early pages. So they're like, okay, we need a limit to this. And you'll note, like, Rita, what's fun is the powers develop a little. So even though DC is not into serialized storytelling at this point, they do a little bit of character building. So like Rita's powers here are that she can get bigger and smaller, but she can't yet expand or contract only certain parts of her body. And so later in the Silver Age run, she starts to develop that. She realizes like, oh wait, I can make my hand bigger and I don't have to make my whole body bigger. And so there's some cool development.
It definitely feels
of these characters.
Also of the movies that were happening where you had Attack of the 50-Foot Woman and the Amazing Colossal Man and the Amazing Shrinking Man and all those things where, oh, now she can go into now she can defuse the bomb because she can grow small here, or then she can grow big and grab something that's flying through the air. So again, very convenient often where how the powers come into play.
Though they do a good, I mean, this issue does it on purpose. Like they do a good job of the team interplay being useful, which is fun, right? Like in this one, the bomb is like Larry's Negative Man goes and retrieves the bomb, and then Rita shrinks and can go inside the bomb and dismantle it, and then Robot Man can contain it because he's metal, and so like they each have a role to play, which is fun, and I really appreciate.
And many other comics from this era also use the structure that this issue uses, where there's these chapters, and there's I think 3 chapters, but really it's half and half, where the first half is their origin stories, and we see the origins of Rita and Larry and Cliff and kind of the Chief as kind of explaining it all. And then the second half is them facing Immortus. And I think we've seen that structure in a lot of other Silver Age comics as well.
Yeah, and the point of it is that, or the reason for it, I'd imagine, is that these are all anthology books. So just like Superman and Flash and Wonder Woman and Batman, they're all debuting in what most comics are at this point, if not all comics at this point, are anthology books. So My Greatest Adventure would have different stories in it. And so they probably, when they would have an extended story, it took up more than one part of a book that usually the story would only be one part of. And like those other books, Flash, Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman, this anthology book then just becomes dedicated to Doom Patrol and gets renamed Doom Patrol. So there is no Doom Patrol Volume 1, Number 1, because they just retitle it, which was very common with the DC books. And actually the pre-Marvel, like Atlas Timely books did the same thing. So yeah. But I like, there's 2 quotes I just want to mention because they speak to why I liked this so much, and the way it resonates for me as a X-Men fan. Like toward the end of the first part, Chief is saying like, our greatest test awaits us, our first official mission, and it's the way we'll know if 4 outcasts of the world can still find their place. And then at the end of the whole issue, they're quoting from the newspaper, which names them Doom Patrol and talks about how these 3 exiles from the human race. So I like that idea that the 3 of them, even though they all started as human, they are all now no longer seen as human. They saved a world that had rejected them. So again, that X-Men tension of like, do we save this world even though they're not treating us equally? So.
And it's funny, I was thinking of those movies, the giant and tiny movies, but there's also hearkenings back to the classic mad scientist, old dark house kind of setup here.
Well, and obviously Negative Man is meant to look like Invisible Man, so that it makes sense
and the Frankenstein monster with Robot Man as well, and the Chief is this kind of, well, he doesn't quite seem mad here, but kind of the mad scientist type. So you can definitely see them pulling from those movies that really were at this point already 20 to 30 years before this was even being written, but probably the kind of movies that Arnold Drake grew up watching.
Yeah, definitely. And Drake, of course, did go on to write some Silver Age X-Men briefly and created characters like Polaris and Havoc. Just want to mention before we move on.
So let us have our negative spirit travel to another dimension.
We only have 60 seconds.
Is exploring multiversity.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
So this is Tangent Comics Doom Patrol #1 from December 1997 from DC Comics.
So this is written by Dan Jurgens, penciled by Sean Chen, inked by Kevin Conrad and Ray Chrising, colored by Jason Wright, lettered by Comic Craft, edited by Eddie Vergonza, Frank Barrios, and Dana Curtin. Jurgens, of course, is the architect of Tangent Comics, as mentioned, and a DC legend who, as you mentioned, a few years prior, did the Death and Return of Superman with a lot of collaborators. Sean Chen, meanwhile, worked mostly at Valiant at this point. This is very early in his career, went on to Marvel, and is still doing work for Marvel. So, yeah, before our summary of the issue, what's the question we are calling for?
So today's question is, what if the Doom Patrol was recreated in name only on a tangent? And this is, as you said earlier, Earth 9.
Earth 9. All right. I don't know how to do a summary of this, and I didn't bother trying to write one. So I'm going to try to make it so fast. We are in 2030, and the world is ending. October 1st, 2030, to be precise. And this group of characters, we find out, are, I guess, kind of superheroes. Unclear what's going on. They decide they need to travel back to stop what's happening. And they come back to 1997, the present time in the tangent Earth, the Earth altered by the Atom's presence at the Cuban Missile Crisis, but now 30 years after that. And they're trying to stop what ends up destroying the world, and they end up realizing it's their presence that leads to the destruction of the world. But then I think they kind of avoid it, and it is... Okay, jumping to impressions. It's a mess, and I didn't like it.
Yes.
And so that's where my summary gets stuck. But there's a lot more I'll point out about the mess. Is there anything in the summary vein that you want to add?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say who the team is. So we have Dr. D-Day, who...
I do like that they start calling her Doomsday. I think that's fun.
And then they call her Doomsday. Nice little also Jan Jurgen inter-reference there, maybe.
And they call them, I should add before you continue with the characters, Doomsday, they call them Doom Patrol because they've come to 1997 and announced that they're there to stop the world ending. So they get called Doom Patrol. So that's the connection to the name. in the tangent world.
Yeah.
So moving on. Who else?
She's
is
like,
in it?
she's like the chief character, the scientist, and she's got like a Louise Brooks heavy bang haircut there. Then she's got her daughter, Lourdes, who has powers, but it's never really defined what those powers are. She thinks
And
they're...
she's known as Firehawk, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Flamehawk or Firehawk.
But yet she
or I
doesn't
don't
seem
know.
to have flame powers. It's confusing. And she thinks they're genetic, but they maybe not, and we don't
No,
really
she
know.
thinks she does. She thinks they're experimental, but then I get the sense that there's some incest stuff going on.
Yeah, there
in
is
this
some
issue
incest stuff going on
because
in this
she's-
issue. Oh, yeah.
She starts flirting with who the earlier Adam when they go back in time, and her mother's like, no, stop it. So I think we're led to believe,
Yes.
maybe it's confirmed and it's just confusing, that in fact the Adam 2 or whatever is her father, which
Correct.
is where her
Yeah.
powers come from.
Yes.
And so her mother's like, no, stop flirting with him, please. So,
Then we get Star Sapphire, but she's not like the Star Sapphire we know. She has like every power under the sun, so she's got a crazy backstory, and she she's
and she
frozen.
talks like Rogue.
And yeah, or
I
even
don't know
I was
why
thinking
she
Rita
talks like
Farr
Rogue.
too. Like everything's like darling and like like she seems very like
I
elevated.
heard
there.
it as Rogue.
Oh,
You
I
heard
heard it
as
as very
a,
like rich lady, which
a
is
Katharine
what like
Hepburn.
Yes,
affectation.
exactly. Like because her backstory is that I guess she lived just for money and men. We're told she's like Blanche Devereaux, and then she I guess was dying, so they froze her in one of the first like cryo freezes, but then she was frozen with her jewelry, and the freezing bonded with her jewelry and it gave her powers, and then she was brought back, so her body is ice but her powers are like force fields, and she can make people float and she can fly. It's like she's got one of those weird things, and she can shoot beams. Very weird.
She does
And then
look cool.
She looks cool. Yes, she's got a pink
She's
cloak.
the only
and
one who has like a design where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm interested.
Yes, because everyone else is in just black and gray, and she's in like this
They look
purple...
like shield agents.
Yeah.
Everyone else.
Yeah, and then the last guy is just a sexy cyborg sexy android named Rampage, who I guess
what's
he's super
one
strong.
cool
He can
thing-
read. Yeah.
That they sort of allude to here is that he's like a descendant of a prototype that to us seems like, even though it's not the DC universe at all, seems Robot Man-esque.
Yes,
because
totally.
we have that Robot Man, like in 1997, we discover that there's these just robot men who do all this stuff, including work at a hot dog stand, who looks just like Cliff, Robot Man from
Totally.
Doom Patrol. And then this android is like, oh, that might be an earlier version of me or something like that.
Yeah,
So-
it was giving me like hot 90s version of like Ian Holm and Alien, that kind of fully functional android synthetic kind of creature. But I mean, none of them really.
And then there's a few Adam versions who show up.
Yes, a few different Adam versions.
Adam in 2030, Adam in 1997, and they're all descendants of the Adam who started this universe.
And then we get a few kind of mysterious government figures. One kind of looks like Two-Face, but he's not a Harvey Dent.
He is in another Tangent comic. He refers to Nightwing, which is an organization So it's a shared Earth, but Jurgens is not telling one story. In the second wave of Tangents, he starts to set up all the stuff with Russia that's in here. That becomes an ongoing plot, and there's the Ultra Humanite then exists in Russia. And they have to fight him, and then that gets dealt with in the 2008 Return to the Universe, because he never finished, I think, the story he wanted to tell. But they are meant to stand alone just in a shared universe. So a character like, that person who's clearly meant to be a Two-Face and refers to Nightwing. I like that the reporter is Lori Lamaris.
Yeah,
who, of course,
yeah.
was Superman's girlfriend, the mermaid.
I was just thinking Lois Lane with the two L's, and she works for a newspaper.
No, Lori Lamaris.
Oh.
The mermaid in the Silver Age.
No,
Superman.
I didn't even know that. I was just thinking the
Yeah.
Lois Lane kind of thing.
And the newspaper is the world's finest. So, like, there's lots of, again, they stick pretty close to the mission where they're using all these names that we know, but they're not pulling in any of the backstory that we know, which I think worked well in Just Imagine Stan Lee. I don't think it worked well here.
Yeah. There's a lot going on, as probably evidenced by our very jumbled summary of this. But at the same time, it feels feels a little rote because we've kind of seen this story so many times. Time travelers go back to the past to save the world, only to find out that they are actually the cause of
that
the,
by going
the
back,
destruction.
they actually caused it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess here they eventually save it, but it seems like their ship is damaged, so they're kind of stuck, I guess, in the past. But yeah, just so much of this is that we've seen before, and instantly we have, when we're back in 2030, the current Adam is going to destroy their ship before they can get to the past, because he knows that they are the ones responsible, and he looks at Lourdes in the eyes, and I guess as we were kind of alluding to earlier, I think senses that, oh, he is her father, that kind of situation. So it all feels like, oh, we've seen this in many different varieties before, so it just doesn't really pop here.
Yeah, it's also convoluted. It required a ton of caption boxes and narration that I think just makes it hard to read. It drops the pacing. It affects the pacing of it. I love the art. I think Sean Chen's art here is real great, classic look comics.
Well, it's
of
so
the
90s too.
Clean,
When you
clean lines, but not the exaggerated 90s. It's more the like really comic booky action hero 90s.
Definitely. As soon as you open it, you go, "Oh my gosh, this could not have been done." I don't know if he's still drawing in this style, but you just go, "Oh my gosh, it had to be from the 90s." But you're right.
Yeah,
like
but
they look like real people. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I just not a fan. I think what went wrong here to me is I appreciate that the concept was in name only. What do we do? But what the Just Imagine Stan Lee universe does is it says, okay, in name only, but let's keep the essence of the character. As we talked about in the 2 issues of That World we've covered already a few weeks ago, Batman and Wonder Woman, go listen if you haven't, what Stan was able to do with his collaborators was figure out what made that character and then pull that through, and in a completely different way. With a completely different name and a completely different origin. In this, to adhere to that mission of truly in name only, it's like, well, then like this could have been some Dan Jurgens creator-owned story.
Yes.
Like this, it means nothing. The fact that they're called the Doom Patrol, it's a clever concept. The Doom Patrol being, of course, this team that shows up to prevent doomsday. Like right? Like the name is a clever concept. But beyond that, there's nothing in this. They're not freaks. They're not weirdos. There's nothing interesting about the team dynamic. It's a totally self-contained story, so it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that Stan's Batman and Stan's Wonder Woman could be brought back now, just rename them, and they exist as part of the Bat family, the Wonder family, because, as you just said, they share enough of the DNA, but at the same time, they're completely different backstories and really different characters. Yeah, here it really is true to the name, in name only. So it's and even then, I think we don't get enough of these characters' personalities because there's so much plot that is in this issue, in these 30-something pages, that we don't really get to live with Lourdes and these other characters. We hear her voice because she's the narrator, so we get that she's like the kind of sarcastic Jubilee kind of voice, but we don't really get to sit with her and really know, okay, what is she all about? And I think that would have benefited maybe if he had pulled back on the plot a little bit and really focused a little bit more on the character building, on the world building there.
Yeah, so I don't need to go back to this Earth to see these characters. Do you?
No. And the only other thing I was going to say is I mentioned that I was getting a little bit of shades of Promethea, and you were mentioning shades of Watchmen. So maybe it's really just shades of Alan Moore, because when we go back to, especially into the 90s, there we kind of get all that. And that's what I wanted to live in a little bit more, which Alan does so great in his works, is really living in that. I mean, I think my favorite thing was that it's the jean company is called Grundy Jeans.
Grundy's, I know,
And
that
yeah,
is
and
fun.
it's
Yes.
nothing gets
The
between
world
me and my
building.
Grundys. I would love
Yeah.
I want to spend more time with that, more time with the robot. There's as you said, there's a robot hot dog vendor, and they're called like Robo Dogs. And Dave was like, ooh, I want to see more about that kind of thing, and a little less of the actual plot.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So let's keep going on our journey today.
Yes, let's go to the world of television with today's Pondering Possibilities.
Will the future you describe be averted?
So, Guido, what are we talking about for our Pondering Possibilities?
We are going to talk about the Doom Patrol show, and it's mainly that this is an excuse to talk about the show. But because they have been on this publishing hiatus where they really haven't done a lot of Doom Patrol publishing, this is a good way to look at another version of trying to launch the team. And it's the most recent version of trying to relaunch the team, so we can see if Dan Jurgens' story had any influence. Though, spoiler, the answer is going to be no. But let's talk about the TV show first.
Yes, so this is the Doom Patrol TV series. It has run for 4 seasons, 40 episodes so far, from 2019 to 2023, still going on. That was originally airing on the DC Universe app, website, whatever, and now it is on HBO Max.
And it was developed by Jeremy Carver. The executive producers have been Jeremy Carver, Jeff Johns, Greg Berlanti, Sarah Schechter, Chris Dingus, and Tamara Becher-Wilkinson, who's done a lot of the writing and show running. And shout out to Ezra Clayton Daniels, who's become a writer and showrunner, story editor for the series the last few years, and wrote the really awesome Upgrade Soul comic. So want to mention that. But the series also stars April Bowlby, Brendan Fraser, Diane Guerrero, Jovian Wade, Matt Bomer, Timothy Dalton originally, and now Michelle Gomez, and a lot of other people who show up, but those are the core cast. We have watched the whole series, and while I don't think we'll really spoil the 4th season, we are going to talk about the whole series, but our focus is going to be the setup. We rewatched the pilot for this episode, so that was your first time rewatching the pilot. I've now seen it 3 times, 4 times. What did you think rewatching it?
It's a great pilot. It really gets the tone of the show right away. Maybe a little bit more stayed in that first episode where it gets a little bit wackier and I think a little bit more vulgar, not in a bad way, but as it kind of goes on, maybe they didn't want to scare people too much with the very first episode.
No,
so
they have enough stuff in there. I mean, there's enough genital humor, cursing, drug use, like it's there. Yeah. But I know it does go further, but I say all those elements are there. They gave you the mission statement up front.
Yeah, and what Arnold Drake and his team didn't do really in the first issues here is what they do on this show is really explore the freak aspect of these characters, and especially with Rita, who in the original comic just goes from a tiny person in a dress to a big person in a dress, but here becomes a whole blob, which is quite striking and deformed, and we never really even in their first introduction know why Larry is wearing the bandages, but here we know that he's horribly scarred, and for Cliff it is, we kind of see a perfect robot drawing in the original comic, but here it definitely feels like someone that was made in a garage. He has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah. I love this show so much. I think that if anyone's listening and hasn't watched the show, I think they should check it out. And I have to say, there's something about the construction of the show and the pieces of the DNA from the comics, Silver Age, Morrison, and Pollock runs, that it pulls from, where even when there's a mediocre episode, which there are mediocre episodes, it doesn't hit every single time. It's not every single hour is riveting. The world is so interesting and the characters are so fun and the performances are so fun that I am in this world, and that interestingly, that's why I think it reminds me of comics. It feels like such a comic booky show to me. When you're reading a run of a comic like the Silver Age Doom Patrol, you're going to get some issues where you're like, whatever, that was fine. But you keep reading because you like the characters, and then you're going to hit an issue where you're like, oh, that was cool. That was fun. So it feels very comic booky, serialized storytelling in that way. I just love it, and I think it really gets the team and what they're
one
dealing
other
with.
comic book thing that it does is put these characters together from all different times, and just like tiny spoiler for this current season, it's only in this current 4th season that we really learn why all these characters from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the so on are all looking the same, and really starting with Niles, the chief, who's even been older than them. So but that just feels comic booky to me, where it's like, okay, we can keep Rita as an actress in the 1950s, and we can keep Cliff as a race car driver from the 80s, because those are that's so inherent in who their characterizations are, especially Rita. Like, she can't be an actress from today, because that's not how actresses today really speak. But so it just feels, oh, that's such a great comic book device. Oh, and it doesn't even explain here in these early seasons why they are able to all exist in 2019 and look at the same. And I kind of love that, just embracing of that comic bookness, because so many other comic book things in other media we've seen have gone out of their way to kind of explain why this is all existing, or updated, or have them look a little bit more modern, and this doesn't do any of that.
Yeah, for sure. I also think the mission statement of the team is really well portrayed in the show and in all of the comics. Not in Jergens, because that's a totally different mission statement. But which is that, like, they're not totally reluctant heroes. I mean, you can definitely call them reluctant heroes, but they're also not social justice warriors.
No.
Like, the X-Men are social justice warriors, and I love them, and that is not a problem for me at all in any way. But it's fun to have this team who is sort of, and this is what the show does really well, like, they're sort of driven by a moral compass and a desire to make things better, but they're also still sort of driven by a selfish need, and they're sort of hesitant to get involved and reluctant to take this on. So it's fun to have those layers and not have just a reluctant hero who gets convinced they need to save the world, but also not have like a totally Superman, like, I'm going to go save the world because I have to make it better. It's fun to stick them in this middle position, and I think that's probably part of what makes them feel really human to readers or viewers.
And I think related to that too, and another thing they have in common with the X-Men that has only kind of come over time is the queerness of a lot of the characters, or either on the either actual queerness or beneath the surface. And I know, of course, over time a lot of X-Men characters have come out, and here we definitely have the Larry character right in this first episode, establishing him as a gay character and played by an out gay actor as well. And over time we see more sexuality and more queerness come into the TV show. And I know it also is reflected in the creators behind the scenes of the comics, where we have Grant Morrison and Rachel Pollack as queer creators. And even going back to, I know you and I have talked about this, even Arnold Drake, we don't know if he was a queer creator, but he wrote...
And I tried really hard to find biographical information, because there's a lot in it that reads, having read a lot of pulps over the years and found the writers and artists who always resonated with me, and found that they were queer, and you in the same way with like the horror pulps, finding those people, there's a lot in there that feels like it is, but
and he wrote this movie called Who Killed Teddy Bear. It's this kind of horror noir thriller, and it stars Sal Mineo, and he's like into muscles, and there's like a lot of close-ups of his oily muscles, and Sal Mineo was a gay actor, and it has also Elaine Stritch playing an out lesbian character. So there's all this queerness in this movie from the 60s, And so it's just interesting that he wrote that and wrote this. So maybe there's something there, but just so much in the TV show. And I think that's the one thing that you and I have talked about, that while on the whole, I think a lot of what Marvel has done on TV and on film has been maybe better than some of the DC stuff, maybe with this aside. DC has certainly been more progressive in terms of queer representation, and at this show at the top of that list, I would say.
Yeah, and the comics too. As we've talked about it and alluded to it, but the last few years it's a remarkable shift. So I'm thrilled to see the forthcoming Doom Patrol comic, because I think it'll be. I mean, they never shied away since the Vertigo issues. That Doom Patrol has always been as queer as they come. I mean, it's even stranger in the Morrison and Pollock runs, of course, than what we see on screen. But yeah. So I love the show. I recommend the show. The first half of season 4 was amazing. I can't wait for the second half of season 4. And I really hope it feels like a good James Gunn show. So even though Warner and James Gunn are sort of trying to start fresh with their vision for moving forward, I hope that this show has a place in it, because I want another few years of it at least. I want to see more stories. I want to see them go in different directions. Right now they're building a big Immortus story, of course, which will pay off, I'm sure, in the second half of season 4, but there's so much more they can do, and I just want to keep seeing what they have in store.
Yeah, it definitely fits a world with Peacemaker and some of the other things that James Gunn has said. So
yeah.
James, if you're listening,
sure. I mean, there are James is listening, I'm sure. There are zombie butts. That is James Gunn trauma stuff, if ever I heard it. So.
Very much so. Yes, totally.
I think of all the DC things that exist, that's the most likely that he'll hold on to. I think everything else, Superman and Lois, I think they're all gone, sadly. But this, I hope, will stick around for a bit. So do you think Dan Jurgens' world had anything to do for the writers of the show? No, I agree.
Not at all. No, not at all.
Completely agree.
But that first Arnold Drake issue, totally, because we see we see each character's or our origin story in this first issue. Obviously, Crazy Jane hadn't been added until later, but we do see those origin stories, and they're remarkably similar to the original story. So that certainly they were going back and revisiting.
Yes. So I can't wait to explore more Doom Patrol, find a way in this show to do that. We're going to explore more Tangent. I'm not looking forward to that quite as much, but we will get there. So
this was the first issue, right, in Tangent? So maybe as they
it was not the first issue. No.
Oh, it's the first one on
just
the
listed,
app.
Yeah. Is it alphabetically the first issue, or probably it's D?
Maybe
Tangent Comics D. Yeah.
Technology confusing me again.
Well, that is a wrap, dear watchers. Thank you for listening. I have been, what did I say I was? Negative Guido.
And I have been Robotman. The reading list is in our show notes. And you can follow us on social media at Dear Watchers.
Leave a review wherever you listen. We'll be back soon for another trip through the multiverse.
In the meantime, in the words of Uatu, keep pondering the possibilities.